Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you're returning. Welcome if you're new. It's really nice to have you here. Today I thought I would do the first 5 last 5 tag created by Katie at Moonflower Moments. I really liked the concept of this, of sharing 5 of your very first decks and 5 of your most latest and purchased decks. So let's hop right in. We're going to start with my first 5 decks. The very first deck that I ever purchased is the Mystical Shaman Oracle. And I was watching, or I was into ASMR at the time. It was, I think, pretty new on YouTube at the time. This is like circa, I don't know, 2014. I think I first started watching it. But it wasn't until many years later where I came across this ASMR channel, Wise Woman Whispers. And her channel focused on doing oracle card readings. And she did it in this lovely whisper voice. I believe her channel is still up, but she no longer posts. It really piqued my interest into the world of oracle and tarot, and I was very inspired by her channel to purchase my very first deck, and that it was oracle. She solely used oracle. She did explain that she really wasn't into tarot, but she read oracle, and she used a lot of Colette Baron Reid's decks, the older ones. I think it's Wisdom of the Oracle that has the circles on it, and visually I was always drawn to that one, and she would always tell you each deck that she used. So one day I researched Colette Baron Reid, and I saw that she had a bunch of decks actually, and her newest one was going to be the Mystical Shaman, and so I went ahead and I purchased it. I still use this deck to this day. This deck and I have gone through a lot. When I first got it in, it was not the most intuitive to a beginner. I was like, how the heck does this woman on YouTube read these cards? I can't remember if she referenced the guidebook in the reading, but she did a lot of riffing off on her own, that intuitive reading. And this deck was not very intuitive for me at first. I really struggled with the meanings that it was trying to convey. And in fact, I had to look at the guidebook, and that really frustrated me. So I put it away for a really long time. And then I picked up tarot in between then. And I really learned that it is about intuition, and it is a combination of learning the cards. And so after a while, I picked this deck back up, and I said, okay, I'm going to erase every bad memory I had with it. I'm going to approach this in a new way. And if I have to use the guidebook, it is not the end of the world, because that means I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm coming to understand the voice of the deck. And that is what I did. And the intuition came very naturally, and it has been here with this deck ever since. So the next 2 decks are actually quite simultaneous as being number 2, but I've put them in number 2 and number 3 respectively, because although I ordered them at the same time, one came in before the other. And the next deck that I got was a tarot deck, and it was the Centennial RWS borderless. I did a lot of research on which RWS deck to get, and I settled on this one. I heard a lot of advice centering on the fact that borderless for beginners was maybe really helpful because you could see more of the image. And I heard that the coloring of this deck was a little bit more softer and muted than the original. So I chose this one. This is the same deck. I've had this in my collection ever since. And I mainly used this one as a reference deck. I used it to learn. I'm just moving the cards around because they were in order. But I really used this to follow the big reference book that I purchased at the time, because it used this RWS, and I wanted one in my hands that I could pick up the cards and look at myself. Even though it had pictures of it in the guidebook, I just wanted one to play around with in my hands, because I've learned that I am a visual learner, and if I can have something also to have in front of me besides just the book, then that helps me learn even more. And since having this deck, I really have only used it as reference until I read New Directions in Tarot, and I came across this book because Sylvie at Tarot Magpie, they were featuring this in their book club on Patreon, and it references this deck specifically because it's a book centered on Pamela Coleman Smith and her illustrations and how it relates to the theater. And ever since I went through the exercises in that book, I have really grown a deeper appreciation and bond to this deck. So I've been pulling it out a lot more for daily draws and other readings and such. deck number 3 is the Sasuraibito Tarot, and I originally purchased this and the Centennial RWS in tandem because I didn't really connect with the images of the RWS, but I connected with the images in this deck right from just viewing them online. And I purchased this with the intention of, this is what artistically I was drawn to at that time. And I felt that if I had a deck that I was more inclined to reach for and look at and flip through, then I would be more inclined to learn the meanings of tarot. And what ended up happening is I used this deck alongside of the RWS. So anytime I did a daily draw, and let's say I got the lovers, then I would look through the RWS and I would pick out the lovers and just look at them side by side in comparison. Along the lines of what happened with the mystical shaman oracle kind of happened here, because I didn't really know the meanings of the RWS system very well just yet. Having two decks that didn't always match up visually. Okay, sorry about that. I pulled out an exact example from when I first got the Sasuraibito just to give a real raw example, and I clearly remember this, but I was doing a deck interview spread with the Sasuraibito, and I pulled the 10 of Pentacles for what is your weakness. And to me, I didn't really know the RWS meanings well just yet. And I was like, how can a positive card be a weakness? I didn't understand it. And then when I went to pull out the reference of the RWS, it confused me even more because I was like, they're visually so different, right? And it really kind of frustrated me because I wasn't understanding why or what could be so negative about the 10 of Pentacles at the time. I believe I remember referencing a couple. I referenced this guidebook, this Sasuraibito's guidebook, and then I had another reference book at the time that I looked up, and even though they had reversed meanings in there, I still didn't quite understand. So it was a little bit of learning tarot all at once, still figuring out the intuitive piece to reading, because with tarot I find that it's a little bit different. It feels a little bit different than oracle, and it completely frustrated the heck out of me, and I felt very deflated by it. However, after, again, having some time away from the Sasuraibito, I came back to it, and I can say how much more I appreciate this deck because I understand how the artist deviated from the original, why they deviated, and how much more meaning that deviation brings forward than following the traditional RWS symbology and the way the characters are in those depictions. So I understand more fully now when an artist deviates from the classic RWS, what they're trying to say. It makes more sense to me. So just know that if you are just in the beginning of your tarot journey and you feel frustrated and you feel confused and you don't quite understand and you just followed the advice to pick a deck that visually made more sense to you, that you liked aesthetically, just know that sometimes you really need to sit down with the original, the RWS, the Marseille, the Thoth, whichever system you are learning, and really learn and hone the classic symbology first. As much as you want to move on to a deck that maybe is more appealing to your eyes, it's still really important to have that foundation of the original first. And as you get more comfortable, 100% purchase that deck, use it side by side with your reference deck, but give yourself more patience, give yourself more grace, give yourself more time to learn the tarot, because I wanted to know it like the second that I bought a deck, but that's just not the reality. I was so excited about tarot. I was so excited to learn, and then I feel like I hit a lot of roadblocks, but just know that those roadblocks are normal. And if you continue pushing through and taking your time, you will get it. You will, I promise. So that is the Sasuraibito number 3. The fourth deck I purchased in my collection was the Earth Magic Oracle cards, and this came at a very wonderful time in my practice. I was starting to feel more comfortable with the tarot. However, I didn't have an oracle deck because, as you remember, I had put away the mystical shaman. So I didn't have an oracle deck that I wanted to use alongside of my RWS. And I came across this one, and I thought, you know what, it's very much different than the mystical shaman. Let me give it a try. I had seen it everywhere. It's quite a popular deck still to this day. You can still find it. It's mass market. It's fairly affordable. And so when I was first starting out, that was a point of contention for me, is can I afford it? And I wasn't sure if I was going to stick with reading cards because I tend to have a lot of different interests in my life, but that doesn't mean they necessarily stick around. And what happens is I often invest a lot of money before I invest a lot of time. When I do it that way, I don't end up sticking with whatever hobby or interest that it may be. So I was really conscious financially the first time around to really pare back. So at this point, I had 4 decks, 2 of which I wasn't really using. So I was growing a little frustrated that I was going to fall into the same pit. But I was understanding the tarot a little bit more. I was starting to catch on to the themes and the meanings. And often the next step that people tell you to do is to incorporate oracle and tarot together in a reading. And I wanted to do that. And so I purchased this deck to do so. And what this deck really gave to me was space and kindness and a wonderful guidebook that still to this day can leave me in tears because the writing is just wonderful and amazing. And it was very harmonious when I started using this deck with the RWS. And it really made that transition into another layer of reading cards a lot more easy and seamless. I have this deck to thank for being able to stick with reading cards, because without it, I just don't think I would be in the same place right now as we speak as I would without this. So that is deck number 4. And the 5th deck that I purchased ever in my cartomancy interest here was the Anima Mundi. I saw this deck on a YouTube channel. I can't remember who featured it, but I fell in love right away. I am an animal lover, and it had a lot of the animals in it that I resonate with a lot, such as bears, and there's orcas in here. I believe there's a koala bear in here. I hadn't had an animal deck yet, truly one that featured animals more in a forward way. I know there are animals in the RWS, but they're kind of more in the background. Or I mean, I guess some of them are in the foreground, but there are other elements of the card or how it's depicted that kind of take over your eye. And I loved this art. And this Queen of Swords here popped up a lot. I mean, she was really following me. And for me, I'm one that gets very stuck in my head, but using logic and reason is often set aside for my more emotive self, my feelings and my heart. And so I decided to designate her as my first, like, this is the deck significator. And that was the first time I ever did that with a deck. And still to this day, this is the signifying card for the deck. So when it pops up, I know that the deck is listening to me. It's showing up. It's reminding me of the powerful message of the Queen of Swords. So I take more heed to it. Anyway, this is the first deck that I purchased after reacquainting myself with the Sasuraibito. I felt more comfortable deviating from the RWS. I didn't want my second go at purchasing a deck that kind of deviates from the traditional imagery to be as frustrating as the Sasuraibito was. However, I connect with animals so well, so I felt like this might be a little bit more intuitive than maybe the Sasuraibito was. And I was right. I got along really well with this deck. I felt super connected to it right out of the box. And to be honest though, I haven't really used this in a long time. This one has been put to the wayside for other decks that I've gotten in my collection, including the next 5 that I'm going to be sharing with you, which is an utter shame because it is so beautifully crafted. Like the artistry here is amazing. It has depth and it has, I don't know, it just has this wonderfulness about it. And I really need to bring this out more often. And in fact, I think I'm going to leave it out on my desk after this video so I am more apt to pick it up. So now we're going to move on to the last 5 decks that I have brought into my collection. And it'll be really interesting to see because there's been a lot of time in between those first 5 decks and now. It's been about maybe 5 or 6 years. So let's see what the Hannah today is gravitating towards. And the first of the 5 latest decks in my collection is the Spirit Cats. I kind of fell into the YouTube made me buy it because this deck had a little bit of a resurgence where people were featuring it on their channels quite frequently. And I don't really own a deck where it has the meanings right on the card. I've never owned an oracle like this before, and I love cats. I mean, I have 4 cats of my own, so I was like, what can go wrong? And from what I've seen, people just really fell in love with these cats. So instead of adopting 4 more real fur babies in my life, I decided to give this deck a go. And it has been wonderful to work with. I think some days where I don't really feel like pulling out a huge spread, or I don't feel like pulling out tarot, sometimes that's a real thing that I experience. This is a great deck to pull out and still interact with cards and meanings in a way, but there's no fuss. I just pick a card, whatever pops out, and the meaning is right on the back. And I like how it is written. You're meeting this cat here. Each cat has a name and has a little bit about them. And it's just a great fun way to interact with cards. That's low stakes. It still gets you using your cards. You're still in the practice of drawing one, but you don't have to commit yourself to a large spread. And sometimes in place of a tarot daily draw, I will use this as my daily draw. So that is the Spirit Cats Oracle. The next deck that I can hardly believe is a newer acquisition in my collection because we just get on so well is the Tarot of the Crystal World. And I originally saw this Kickstarter campaign, but at the time I had just acquired the White Newman and I was fearful that the place in my collection between those two might clash. So I did back this, but then I backed out of it, unfortunately, and in hindsight that was really goofy, but it gave me space to work with the White Newman and figure that one out and work with it and give it ample time. And recently I saw this. Someone was selling it and it was a very decent price, so I picked it up. It's in beautiful condition. I love the cardstock. I love the colors. I love the imagery. I pulled it out of the box and there was an instant connection and bond with this deck that I wasn't necessarily expecting. Just because you like the imagery of a deck does not mean that you are going to connect with it right away in practice, actually using it. But that's exactly what happened and I've had a hard time putting it down. I feel like I've had this deck longer than I've had because of that bond. We speak to each other really well. It's a very lovely conversation. We just tend to get each other, and it's really made it fun to work with. And honestly, I have talked about this, I think, in previous videos, but the guidebook to this is very small, but it packs a punch with its meanings. It's like maybe 2 to 3 little sentences or clips at the most. For 8 of Cups, you are abandoned. You have abandoned. You have let go. Things that once brought joy are behind you. Like, I don't know, it just packs a punch. I just love it. I think part of me wishes that I could be a concise and punchy writer like that, but I tend to love words, and the more words, the better. And I like to go on and on and on. So coming across someone or an entity, or in this example, this deck that can pack a punch with such little words is just blows my mind and makes me love it even more. So that is Tarot of the Crystal World. The third most recent deck in my collection is the Anthropologist Tarot. I do have a full unboxing and first impressions of this deck, so if you want more in depth about my first impression, then I will link that video above in the cards. But this is a collage deck that I saw featured on Joniki's channel, and I was in awe by it from the moment she brought it out. The backs, I was like, ooh, what is that? And then she turned them around, and I was like, holy moly, I've got to have this deck. But what stopped me originally, and I go on to say this in that video, is the guidebook is very, very minimal, and in a way that is different than the Tarot of the Crystal World. It only has keywords for upright and reverse, and that is it for every single card. And I was a little bothered by that because anthropology, to me, not that I am studying it or in that field, but to me it is a very slow and studied topic. It's kind of like the King of Pentacles, if you will. It's something that you take your time with. It's something that you need to know more about. So to have some of these things that are collaged in and to not know where they come from was a little bit disheartening, because I'm a naturally curious person and I want to know where these historical things come from. I want to know the reason they were chosen, and that just wasn't provided in the guidebook. However, I didn't want to let that keep me from getting this deck, and I'm so glad it didn't. It is punchy, it is vibrant, it is just cheeky. It's a lot of fun to work with. It doesn't mince words at all. It just comes out full frontal. It's unapologetic. It has some of my favorite depictions of cards in it ever. And let me see if I can find a couple. Okay, so I found them. We have the High Priestess. I love the use of the blue and red. Those are colors that are really resonating with me right now. We have this Queen of Wands. I don't know what it is, this porcelain figure. I just love her so much. I think she embodies the Queen of Wands. She's made of porcelain, but she's very fierce, so I love that juxtaposition. The Ace of Pentacles is just a lot of fun, and I've never seen it depicted in that way. It's just, I don't know, how cool is that? And then my most favorite card in this deck, and for this card of all time right now as I speak, is the Star card. I like the black and white in the background. I like this bronzed figure that doesn't have a head. She's outlined a little bit in blue. I don't know, I love the texture that's layered on top. It just kind of takes my breath away, and that to me is exactly what the Star feels like. But kind of in the opposite way of, you know, you are exhaling a deep, heavy breath and getting ready for your next inhale, which will be fresh and light and anew. So anyway, that is the Anthropologist Tarot. The second to last newest deck in my collection is Tarot of the Animal Lord. This is an out-of-print deck. It used to be mass market, produced by Lo Scarabeo, and I came across it in one of my regular places that I look for decks, and I needed it. It features all animals, and unlike the Anima Mundi or the Northern Animal Tarot, which I have both, these it just feels like a different vibe. And I have mentioned this, but rhinos are very near and dear to me, and this deck included the rhino as the King of Wands, which to me resonated more deeply than other positions that rhinos have been assigned previously. And when I saw this, I just had to buy this deck. And it's not as common as you may think for a rhino to be included in an animal deck. And so the fact that this had a rhino in itself, I just was an instant buy for me. But this feels wise. It feels like it has depth. I can't wait to study this a little bit more and dive into each animal's little world going on here and how that world relates to the tarot and what it's depicting. I feel like this is very storybook-like, and I don't really have a deck that fills that niche just yet. One where I feel like I am sitting down and reading a book that starts once upon a time. So I'm excited to get to know this deck more and dig into it. This feels like a very grown-up animal deck, and it deserves reverence and respect, and I can just feel it asking for me to take my time with it. So I'm going to respect that and do just that when I have more time to do so. And my most recent, fresh off the press acquisition is the JK Tarot reprint by Tarot Collectibles. And I think this is, I don't know, this kind of came to a circle very well, and in a way that I wasn't expecting, but this is an RWS clone, and it features bright colors. It has crisper line work. Some of the cards are facing the opposite way of the traditional RWS because this is a deck that was created by a Japanese artist, and so they read right to left versus left to right. And I think the position change of some of the cards makes perfect sense. I really like that nuance of the deck. It's bold, and I don't know, it brings a new life to the RWS. And if I had known about this deck back when I was starting my journey, I feel like I would have resonated more with the RWS from the onset, because I just like this version. I don't want to say a lot better because I've come to know and love my Centennial version very well and I respect it. But oh man, I just feel like I would have had a better, more smooth experience, or maybe not. I guess I don't really know. But this is so up my color alley. I love this like 70s orange and this 70s like green. It's just my color palette. And I just got this in the mail the other day, so kind of a full circle that I started my tarot journey with the Centennial, and my most recent acquisition is the JK Tarot, which is a clone and reimagining a little bit of this deck. So I don't know, came full circle, and I really wasn't expecting that, and I didn't even notice that until pulling this out and speaking about this deck right now. So that is my latest deck in my collection. And there you have it, my first 5 and my last 5. That was really fun bringing out all of those decks and taking a look through and seeing how my tastes have changed a little bit, or maybe how they haven't changed. It's nice to know that I'm still interested in connecting with the RWS. Thank you guys so much for being here and for taking time to spend with me today. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to stay around a while, and if you want to see more content like this from me. Thank you so much to Katie from Moonflower Moments for creating this tag. I think it was really clever. It was a lot of fun to do. And until next time, see you around.